The last bit of interior work are the floorboards. My intention here is I'm going to notch this aft piece so that it comes forward and rests onto this frame here. The forward piece will be notched much bigger to come all the way back to sort of that piece as well. And we'll have to cut around the mast step. Now, this board's a little bit wider than I need, but I want to get that notch in there, and then I'm going to have to taper down from whatever thickness I desire at the center here back to, I don't know, maybe a couple of inches here, so it will sit down the bottom on the frame. Then we'll be tapering from there through to that, and each one will be tapered from a sort of a full thickness in the middle, tapering back so that they're all sort of equidistant at any point. So if this is 4 inches wide here, the next one will be 4 inches wide. So I'm just going to trim that out and see how I can notch that into there. I'll clean that up. There's a little bit of room and play on either side, which is good. Now this is a little bit wider than I want the center floorboard, but I can make the center one a little bit wider than the others, and this is still a bit thick. Now at the back here, I suppose I'll be looking at, well, how big is the space in there? I'd say we could probably go down to 2 1/4. Will fit into there. Yeah, 2 1/4 I think on center. I've marked that at 2 1/4, 1 1/8 either side of center. So I'm going to draw a line from that point down to the forward edge, and then cut that out as on taper, clean it all up, fit the first piece in. Work my way from the center out. Well, there's our first piece cut, a little rough. I'm going to plane up the edges, figure out the forward piece, and then work my way out. There's only 5 boards will go in the floor, so we'll put another one approximately there and there, and the rest will be a little easier, I believe. Floorboard, centerpiece, forward section. I need to cut out where the mast step is so this can lay down onto the frames themselves. I've calculated it all out, measured it all out. A little oversized, it's not going to be a big problem. Probably a little better anyways. So I'm just going to cut it out with my jigsaw. Moment of truth. That will be pretty good, I think. I can trim a little more off the sides, and then I'm going to have to just kind of taper this one in. I can't take too much off, you know, this outside perimeter here. In other words, I can't taper it all the way from the very end all the way down. I'll just end up cutting this in half. So this piece up here, I'm probably going to have to bevel the underside maybe so that it sits down into there nicely. So we can clean that up. I think I should be able to get this almost down flat onto the frame. It's really starting to bind up in these two. So if I start a taper and undercut bevel somewhere in this area here, taper that down to there like so, and then undercut the bevel on it, I can get it down onto the frames. So I had a bit of a rethink on this. Really, with the 4-seat in there, floorboards do not really need to come any further than the actual mast step, so I'm just going to draw a line there and I'm going to chop that off. And the other reason it would become an issue is this curve in here. Now I could just bring the next floorboard to this frame here and taper it out, I suppose, to make it wider. That is another option that I could consider. I'm just trying to sort of think, you know, why would I need the floorboards going that far forward? And I can't actually think of any reason as to why I do need the floorboards that far forward. Maybe round this off a little bit. Maybe I'll just cut it straight across there and give that a bit of a round so the next one can come off a bit of a taper. That's what I'll do. Yeah, I think that's going to be a much simpler solution with the 4 thwart in. That's more than far enough. I mean, some little dinghies, other than the mast being in the way, would have a little tiny seat up here, but that's not in the plans and that's not what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to stick with this plan then. So that one is ready to go in. Time to start making the next one. In the traditional build, we don't actually have floor timbers, which would be structures coming across, glued to the hull in a plywood construction method, and then the floorboards would actually be flat across, and that makes it a little bit easier. What I need to do though is I need to be able to bend in just the same way we did the planking on the bottom here. It's not a straight piece of wood that will just go down in there and bend into place, because when it bends and torques into place, it's going to move closer on certain ends. So I'm actually going to need to do a little bit of spiling, pattern making, so that I can cut the next piece out, so that when it lays in here and sort of bends down into the bottom of the boat, the gap between all of the first piece will remain equal. Now I do know that this is a straight edge through here, so I have laid my little batten evenly spaced through there. I can just make a few points along there to know exactly where it is evenly spaced. So it starts right in here is where the taper will begin. Just put a couple in here just to be sure. So we're back to the exercise of doing some what we call spiling or pattern making. I mean, I know that this is a straight line, but pieces of wood that are in straight lines when they're bent are not straight anymore. So I'm going to put a few spots in here, just kind of judging that when I push that down, that's where it is. I've got my piece held down with some lead weight scraps that I have used in the shop for that very purpose. Let that glue sit up a bit. I'm going to take that piece out and make a pattern. So I've taken my spiling pattern and I'm going to lay it down and out onto my stock. And I can mark a few of these points in here and we'll just see how straight that line is. I know between these four it should be straight, but I need to move my pattern off because it gets wider down in this end here. So the question is that a straight line or not? Should be a straight line between here. There's it. There you are. Which it is. So it's a straight line through there. Now, is it a straight line between all these points? Pretty much. So I've roughly cut it out. So the point being is if I press this down and make an even gap of 1/4 of an inch or so, what happens when this gets bent down? Do we have an even gap? I mean, obviously up the front here, that's pretty straightforward to do. Line that up straight. Push this and twist it down. So we're pretty good through here. I mean, but the back end, which I know I was a little off on my cutting. So we're going to trim that down. I'm wondering whether it's going to be worthwhile at this point to actually screw this one down on center and hold it in place, because it just keeps moving as well. I think I'll do that. These pieces of cedar for the floorboards are a little bit thicker than the final thickness. I'm making them, then I'm just going to clean them up, and because I can draw all over them, then I can run them through the planer and thin them down. They are currently, we're currently at almost at a 1/2 inch thick. I'll probably take it down to 3/8. So my intention is to use a 1/2 inch bronze screw into the frames. Now I've got to be careful. I can't just go dead down the center, because I'll hit the screws that are already there. So do I sort of stagger here, there, and everywhere is what I think I would do, which means I will want to make some measurements so they look even. So on this one, if I go in 1 inch from this side, and this one I go 1 inch from this side, is that going to pull it down to the bottom, or we go 1.5 inches? You know, do we need to really get out to the edges better? I think that's probably the way to go. Inch. We're just arbitrarily going to mark this. I can draw all over this because I know that I am going to be planing it down. All the marks will disappear. I may not even need a screw every frame, but that's what we'll do. Seems to be a pattern though of installing pieces, then taking them back out again for sanding and varnishing, but it's going to be a lot easier to varnish the pieces when they're not in the boat. So away we go. We're committed now. Right, so if I keep some sort of pattern going, that side, this side, that side, this side, that side. So we'll start over here and put a mark there, one over here. Right, the edge of this board definitely needs to be cleaned up. It's a rough cut on the bandsaw, but if I was to put a simple spacer into there and there, approximately what we'll be looking at as far as space between those, and I push that right down flat, it won't be this wide, and this one gets twisted down. I'm looking for a similar gap through there, which I think we're pretty close to. So once I clean up this edge with the block plane, I think we're pretty close. Now hopefully this we will be able to make a mirror image of it for the other side. But right now the question is, what shape should we put on the outside perimeter here? Should it be a straight line, a tapered line like the center here, which would make everything look a little bit more symmetrical? One, it's a very wide board to actually bend down. I mean, it can be done, it's not a problem there. Screws will hold it down, but that piece is 2.5. So if one was to taper this down to 2.5, where are we here? In there, where is it going to end up with sort of on rivets and things? Not that that's an issue, because once we press this down, the rivets will just embed themselves in the back of the floorboard. A bit of walking on them, so to speak. So if I was to taper this one down to that thickness and taper down the other end, I think that's what we'll go with. And once I do that, I'll flip it over and see if it fits mirror image on the other side. Would be really nice. So that was in there like so, and it fit quite nicely. We flip it over to a mirror image, look, match it. How does it fit into there? I think it's going to be just fine, so I just need to trace this one and make the exact same piece. Now in theory, this is the outside edge of the second piece of floorboard. If I was to trace the outside edge onto my third and final piece, will it bend in and match that up? For the third and final piece of floorboard, I have it fitting to the center line. I got a bit of trimming to do on this edge here, but I've got a pretty even space. I mean, a bit of cleanup. Now what I want to do is I want to make somewhat of an arc through here, so I am going to see if I can clip down a batten like so. And bring this through to something like this. Check it so that it looks like a pretty nice curve. That it does. So, I mean, the question is, you know, we don't need to come up too far in the back here in the stern. Really, you're just going to be slipping down into the bottom anyways, and seats will come out. How far will this seat come out? Center seat is coming out to here. And in the plans, it doesn't really come much further than that. In hindsight, I probably could have made this center one, you know, another 5 inches longer, and then got them shorter and shorter so there was a bit more of an arc through here. But again, there's still an option to do that other than, well, I think it is what it is. So I'm going to just trace this out, the outside perimeter here. Come on. Okay, so we cut that out, clean it up, and match it to the other side. With all the floorboards fitted and installed, I am now going to remove them and then sand them all down and varnish the undersides with a couple of coats. The top sides will just get oil. I don't think it's a good idea to have floorboards, high gloss varnish on there. When they're wet, it's extremely slippery to step inside the boat. So now that the floorboards are done, you can move on to putting in some thwart knees. So thank you very much for following along with this build. Do consider becoming a subscriber, hit the like button, maybe the bell, it'll be notified of any new videos coming out in the shop.